Yes, welcome back to How Did I Get Here? This is, of course, the show where we're asking the question, well, how did you get here? I've got a guest today who's got an interesting career. He's a professional cycling photographer. Make sure I get that right. So he doesn't take photos of just anything. There's professional cycling events. You know, he's worked major cycling events like the Tour de France, the Giro D'Italia. I could go on. And despite being at the start of, I'm sure it's going to be a very long career, he's done some pretty amazing things already. Zac joins me today. Zac, g'day.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. It's lovely to be here.
No worries. Let's jump right into it. Explain to us first, what does a cycling photographer do?
I basically chase blokes around in Lycra, to be honest, with a camera.
So living the dream.
Yeah, living the dream. Yeah. I work for an agency in the UK and then I do a bit of freelance stuff myself. And I basically go to all of the biggest cycling events internationally, mostly in Europe, being a Eurocentric sport, but a few in Australia as well. And a whole bunch of other places too. So living my dream, at least. Most people, I think, see cyclists as annoying things on the road, and I see them as sort of, my life's passion. So it's cool to combine it.
Your life's passion. So where does the aspiration come from? Because it's a unique one.
Oh yeah, it's niche for sure. It's not like AFL photography or something like that. But I was always obsessed with cycling as a kid. My dad bought me my first road bike when I was sort of 8 or 9. And I grew up watching Lance Armstrong and Cadel Evans and stuff. Yeah, so that had a big impact on me. And then I was probably 12 or 13 and I was at a local race up in the hills in Perth. And a guy that I'd met, this old British dude who's sort of a bit of an enigma in the Perth cycling scene, called Steve, gave me this camera just to use for the day at the race. And I'd always sort of been interested in photography and I'd obviously always loved cycling. So I started taking pictures at this race and it sort of went from there. I was like, this is super fun. It's really exciting and it's a nice way to be involved in the racing when I'm not going to be, that talented or racing like that myself. Yeah. So it just sort of stemmed from there. Yeah.
So first steps, obviously there's no uni course for cycling photography. There's not even a TAFE course really. How do you start to build that career?
Yeah, I basically, from that day, went around and borrowed every camera I could get my hands on because obviously, camera equipment's not cheap.
Yeah.
And so, I was borrowing from my cousins and then eventually the school media department, I sort of got chummy with the people that ran that and they let me borrow their cameras from there every weekend basically. And I just sort of shot every single race I could find in Perth that I could sort of get to. And my parents were incredible in terms of driving me to these races and stuff and sort of helping me with that. And just sort of as I got a bit older, I went over east for a couple of races at the start of 2018 and then the start of 2019 I went over east again for the Tour Down Under, the national championships, the biggest races in Australia. And sort of talked to the right people and went from there to Europe that year. So yeah.
Of course, these days everyone's got a camera in their pocket.
Yeah.
And everyone can whip out their phone and take a photo of a cyclist. But there's a bit more nuance to what you do than that. What was the learning process like of, learning to take the more professional side of photos?
It's always funny when you're at a race and you get some bloke or anyone rock up next to you and they've got their iPhone out and they're like, look at this picture I took. What do you reckon? It's pretty good, yeah? And you're like, yeah, mate, it's great and awesome. It's not sort of as simple as watching anything on YouTube because there's not really that much out there. I learned a lot from people that I watched shoot, locally, even other photographers and stuff, and just talking to them and learning how the settings on the camera worked and that sort of stuff. And then when I got to the bigger races, sort of more professional photographers that I met, and you've got to become a sponge. And just from watching them, watching what they produce, how they produce it, it just sort of, it's like anything. If you sort of around the best people in the world, it pushes you to be better. So I've not had a course or done any sort of formal training aside from I got taught how to use the manual settings on a camera in an afternoon by a friend of mine who was a professional photographer. But aside from that, it's pretty much just been trial and error, which is nice because it's cool to be able to do something that you only get better at by doing more of it, rather than having to get a piece of paper to be good at it, I suppose.
Absolutely. Speaking of that progression there, part of being a photographer, especially someone who might work in freelance areas, is building up your name, building up your portfolio. What was that like for you in that early part of your career?
Yeah, it's hard. Like being in Australia, it's tough because you're so isolated from where the races happen. Because we get January here where it's big and the international focus is on us, but the rest of the year, the racing here, it's pretty limited. And especially then being in Perth, even more isolated, it makes it more difficult. So Instagram has been huge. Like without Instagram, I wouldn't have a career, and sort of pushing as much as possible out there. But to be honest, like Perth having such incredible professional cyclists here and from here has helped enormously, because I was able to get out and photograph like Jai Hindley, who won the Giro D'Italia last year. Yeah. So people like him, people like Ben O'Connor, who finished 4th in the Tour de France in 2021, and Luke Durbridge and Cam Meyer, like all of these international names and household names in the sport. And then having a picture of them that you put on Instagram rather than a picture of Joe Bloggs at the local race makes a huge difference, because it quantifies it in people's eyes, internationally speaking, I suppose.
Absolutely. I want to hear the story of your first major tour. Which one was it, and what was the experience like?
I was the Giro in 2019.
Yeah.
And I'd been invited, so I went to the Tour Down Under. I met the two guys I travel with there now. So a guy called Chris Auld and another guy called Russ Ellis. Russ actually lives in Perth now, but they're both from the UK. And by the end of the week, I'd sort of pestered them and sort of built enough rapport with them that they invited me to go to the Giro with them that year.
Yeah.
So I rocked up to the Giro and, oh man, it was just unbelievable. Like it started in Bologna that year, and they had like an individual time trial up the top of this like basilica on the hill, which I don't know the name of, but it's super famous in Bologna. Like you Google Bologna, it's the first thing comes up. And it was a big learning curve. It was really, really wet the first week, and I lost one of my lenses. It got water damaged. So I was sort of really stressing about that. And then another one of my lenses got badly water damaged, but came back to life. So I was like borrowing gear from colleagues. I was like flying by the seat of my pants. But going with Chris and Russ there made all the difference, because it's so hard to physically just cover an event, logistically speaking, experience, all that sort of stuff. It's not having to have such a brutal crash course, doing it on my own and doing it with them who've done it before was, like made all the difference. But I mean, it was phenomenal. It was surreal.
When you're covering a major tour like that, Giro Tour, are you just living out of a backpack and just following the cyclists around, really?
Yeah, 100%. Like the Giro, we do hotels. Yeah. So we drive around, like we either have a hire car or Chris brings his van. And if he brings his van, we get to take our bikes, which is great, because you can normally get an hour or so before a stage most days to go for a ride, which is huge. And then at the tour, we actually camp because it's summer, and the campsites in France are amazing. So we take his van, have all our camping gear in there and our bikes. And I was really apprehensive about that, because I did it the first time last year. And I was like really sort of nervous about it, and like didn't sort of wanted a nice bed and a shower every night, but it turned out to be awesome fun. And I mean, we got lucky with the weather. It was just amazing. But yeah, it was actually really, really fun, just simplifying everything around the race, which is always so intense, especially the tour. Like it's just a circus for 3 weeks.
Yeah, like speaking about the tour, like, we do have that international focus on cycling in Australia here in January, but then of course TVs start getting switched to SBS in July, because it is that, that highlight of the year in the cycling calendar. As somebody who's there on the ground, probably not something a lot of people get to experience. What's it actually like?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like and especially being privileged enough to be inside it, like inside the barriers and around the riders and a part, like a small part, but a part of the race. It's like a childhood dream. Like, I mean, I've got a really good friend who we often talk about, like a conversation we had at school in like a study period in year 12. And he was like, what's the goal like with this? Because I'd never shut up about how I wanted to photograph cycling and how I was doing it every weekend and stuff. He's like, what's the goal? And I said, the goal, like number one top goal would be Tour de France. And then when I sort of remembered that, and then was at my first one or at my second one last year, where I just felt a lot more confident with what I was producing and sort of had got a feel of the ropes and all of that sort of stuff. And especially after 2 years of COVID when I couldn't travel, it's unbelievable. It's a rolling circus in that it just rocks up to people's towns every day. Everyone comes out of their homes, like everyone's there. The best riders in the world are there. Everyone's talking about it. And then it just leaves.
it's over as soon as it starts.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Like it's for those people it is. And then because you're on it, like you just sort of like traveling around France or around like Denmark for a few days last year and stuff. And just, you get to see all these amazing places, but you get to see them for 5 minutes before you got to go. So
that was kind of my next question. Traveling the world as a photographer, how much do you actually get to see, or is it all cycling?
Oh, like I can say I've been to a lot of places, but I haven't been to a lot of places. Like you get the odd rest day in between so like last year at the tour, for example, the first rest day was on Lake Geneva. Yeah. And we're on the French side. So we're staying in this campsite where like it was basically overlooking Lake Geneva. It was insane. And so they normally have 2 rest days in a grand tour. And so we use it to do laundry and admin and like get caught up, because you just can't do that on a normal stage. But then we also had a chance to go for a ride that afternoon. So went for a ride in the Alps and like back down to Lake Geneva. And then it was like 30 degrees. So I went and had a swim. And it was just one of those days where it's just like, this isn't real. Like this can't possibly be real. And then, the next day you're back on the race and you're back stressing about, are you going to get to a spot? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? So it's very fluctuating in terms of the reality, but at the end of the day, even on bad days, like I'm getting to do what I've always wanted to do. So you've got to apply a bit of perspective to it, because whinging about a bad day at the Tour de France is it's a bit like,
absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. Mistake.
So as you mentioned, so for those 3 weeks, everyone's talking about cycling. And of course there's the moments of triumph, there's the winner, there's the Champs-Élysées at the end. But a big part of that focus is often when there's a big crash at at any of the tours really, but especially at the Tour de France. Do you have a specific policy about taking photos of something like that?
It's very much like shoot first, ask questions later.
Right, yeah.
Like I'd never ever publish a picture of someone if they were seriously injured or worse.
Of course.
Luckily, that doesn't happen often. Like it's very rare that someone will die or that someone will become seriously injured. I've shot a few, especially last year. I had a few crash pictures which only I got, which is just luck. It's pure luck. I got one of them, the girl in the women's Tour de France actually. So it's the first one. And Lorena Wiebes, who won the opening stage, and she was leading the sprint competition, like nailed on to win the green jersey and all that sort of stuff. And she crashed on this really nondescript piece of road, and it was a bad crash. Like it was brutal. And I got this picture of her falling and then her teammate riding over the top of her. And initially, and then like she sort of fell towards me at about 40k an hour. So I'm sitting there like pulling out of my camera like that to make sure she's not going to hit me, but still holding the shutter down to get the shot. And then like she got up straight away. She ended up having to abandon the next day, but I posted that picture because I knew she was all right. And she DM'd me straight away and said, "Oh my God, can I have this picture?" And her teammate that's riding over the top of her, same deal. So 9 times out of 10, in the moment, it's really horrible and it's hardcore, but I mean, they want the pictures. Like the riders themselves, the ones that are crashing want the pictures. And yeah, it's part of the sport. It's a reality of the sport. It's the harsh reality of it for sure, and it's really brutal, but it is just sort of the way it is, and it's part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you work for an agency, but you also do some freelance stuff. Life as a freelancer, next paycheck's never guaranteed. How do you manage that?
Oh, it's tough. Like, I'm still waiting for invoices to be paid from last month,
right?
Which then fund expenses going forward before I then get paid again. And it's very much moments when you feel like you're a baller, and then moments when you're like, oh, I've really got to cut back because this person's not paid me or that person's not paid me or their pay cycle's longer. So it's something you got to navigate. my mum, she works for herself. She's a media consultant. So I've seen it with her, just, in a bigger sense with government agencies and big companies that take forever to pay. So I've sort of learnt a lot with her about how to manage it, but it's still frustrating. But it's the reality. But it's a weird thing. It's like you don't rock up to, say, Coles and like do a whole shop and then just walk out and be like, yeah, I'll pay you in a few weeks. It's like, weird, it's a weird concept, but it's the reality of it. And it's just something you got to deal with.
Speaking of things that don't go to plan, 2020, COVID forces, shut down the borders, events are cancelled and postponed. I think the tour was postponed that year, but a few other events were cancelled. What was that year like for you? And, there's 2021 and 2022. It's still happening.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
I didn't get to go.
Yeah.
So like 2019 was really good. And that was great. And I had a whole bunch of momentum going forward for 2020 and all that. And I had contracts signed with clients and all that sort of stuff. And got to March off the back of the January sort of season I'd done in Australia and all those races. And everything went haywire. So I was stuck here for 2 years. I managed a couple of bike shops, which was really fun because I'd always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Obsessed with bikes. So I spent all my money on bike equipment and new bikes and all that sort of stuff. So, it was definitely, I had it better than a lot of people, but at the same time, it was so frustrating because I'd finally sort of got to a point where I was making ground and gaining momentum, professionally. And then it was just all taken away. And I mean, I tried to get out, but then $3,500 to sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks and like no guarantee that you were flying back. I had like Jai, who won the Giro, he tried 8 separate times to get back from Europe, and he booked a business class ticket every single time and every single one got cancelled. So it's like, I don't have the funds to book a business class ticket to then get it cancelled, to then get stuck in Europe. Like it was crazy. So very frustrating, but glad that it's back to normal now.
You've predicted my next question because I want to talk about Jai Hindley now because I know you know him, and of course he won the Giro last year. As a Perth photographer, seeing that happen, what was that like?
Well, I didn't see it happen. So
the next question,
So I was at the Giro until stage 13, and I had a race scheduled, a women's race in the UK scheduled called Ride London for a team that was later in that month. So I left the Giro early to go and cover that, which even if Jai didn't win, I would have regretted because it's probably the worst run event I've ever been a part of. Like, it was a joke. It was run by the London Marathon people, so they'd never run a bike race.
Right.
So we weren't being allowed to stand where we normally would stand, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And then to add insult to injury, I was watching on my phone, like this dude I've known for 10 years who is a really good friend, like win the second biggest race in the whole world. And I'm the only photographer from Perth that's over there, and I'm not there. I'm in London shooting a stupid race that I'm hating and like that I could have got a colleague of mine to cover me for. And I'm just sitting there like, oh, well, never doing this again. So yeah, I mean, look, it was unbelievable. It was, and there's no one that deserves that success more. And he's the most humble and just real dude you'll ever meet. And that's never going to change. It hasn't changed and won't change. But I mean, I probably could have retired off the pictures I took. Not really, but it would have helped a lot.
Would have been great.
It would have been great to have been there, with his family and all that sort of stuff, taking those pictures. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I'll never live down.
Did Jai, talk to you about it?
Oh, like, big time. Yeah. Oh, he rubs it in. Yeah. Like he lets me know that it was funny. I mean, no belief is sort of some of the things he said and that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, is what it is.
Now, of course, your product is the photos. So I was looking through your Instagram this morning and yesterday, and I picked out 3 photos that I thought were a bit more unique, and I just wanted to, go through them a little bit.
Yeah, sweet. I printed them out.
I printed them out because we'll put them up on the screen though. The first one, I think this is at the Giro in Hungary.
Yeah, that's right.
Could you explain the story behind this one?
Yeah, so it was, I'd never been to Hungary before. I'd never been to Budapest. Budapest is amazing. The way I'd sum up my experience in Hungary is like Budapest or bust. because the rest of Hungary, you know, no disrespect to Hungarians whatsoever, doesn't look like Budapest. So pictures wise, it was really grim. So we'd driven out of Budapest that day, and we'd decided not to shoot the rollout out of the city because it's still in neutral. So there's like the race director's car driving in front of the peloton, but it was like over one of these famous bridges, and we were sort of didn't shoot that. So we were like, yeah, we'll find something out there, no worries. And we're driving, there's nothing. Like, it's just horrible. And we were really getting stressed about like having to sort of stop to then cut across the course to then get to the finish. And we were starting to clutch at straws, and we drove past these horse riders that were like on the side of the road. There's about 10 of them, and they're all just sort of circling around, like keeping the horses entertained. And they're all in these like traditional costumes.
He's got a sword.
And he's got a sword. And we were like, oh, well, there's the shot. And they'd like mowed this path in the crop alongside the road. And they basically, as the riders came along, they just started galloping alongside the peloton. And we just sort of camped in the farmers' crops and tried not to sort of ruin them. And they hooked past, and it just made what was honestly like before and after that day not very nice photos wise. It made the day. And it probably made the Hungary leg of the Giro, because it was really, really good, but pictures wise, that definitely stood out, and it's different. Like it's a cool, unique picture. It was fun to take.
Speaking of unique, this next one kind of just like sticks out like a sore thumb on your Instagram, because there's no bikes in it. It's just this plush lion that we just kind of saw and we just kind of cracked up at. What's going on here?
So that's Tadej Pogačar. So he'd won the Tour de France the last 2 times in a row, and he just moved into the yellow jersey. And you get the lion, so it's the LCL lion, it's the mascot of the yellow jersey. Oh, right. So he's walking onto the podium, and that's his shadow on the side there. Yeah. So, and you get like the arm of the yellow jersey, so you can see it's him, and he's got a very distinct profile. So if you know that it's Pogačar. And I basically I took it, and somebody else's flash went off at the same time. So it popped his shadow onto the wall behind. And I really like it, to be honest. It's honestly one of my favorite pictures I've taken.
I love it.
Because it's just a bit weird. You know? But yeah.
Final one here, like just the aesthetics of this photo. So it's the riders going through the crop of sunflowers.
Yeah.
Explain to me this one.
Oh, well, I mean, it's like you think Tour de France and like, you know, you reference SBS, like their telecast.
Yeah.
You think sunflowers. And we always wanted to get a proper sunflower picture, but you always drive along and the crop's facing the wrong way, or it's depressed and like they're sort of dying, so they're all going to sleep, or they're too far away from the road or whatever. And then we got to this point on this stage where there was sunflowers on the other side of the road, there were sunflowers on our side of the road, so you could sort of shoot it like it was just sunflower and no road. That shot I was so stoked with, because I got the white jersey at the front, the yellow jersey in the middle, and the green jersey at the back. Right. So like the 4 leaders jerseys in one picture, and like 3 of the 4 biggest names in the race in one picture, in like a perfect line in the sunflower. So it's just one of those, like, it all sort of fell into place. But yeah, nice to have like a quintessential sunflower picture. Like I can tick that one off the list, you know?
So like before we get into our final questions, like what I want to know about the process of like staking out a spot. Like what are you thinking about when you're looking for that perfect shot?
Well, we do it a bit differently. Like some of our colleagues will spend days and weeks on Google Maps, and it's like the kids that study at school. Like we sort of just cram the night before or the morning of the test, just like I did at school. And we sort of you get like a road book for the race, which has like a detailed map of the course and all the roads around it. And then you have a schedule, and the schedule basically breaks down when the riders are going to be at each kilometre marker. And you get like a fastest, a medium, and a slowest time they'll be there. And you have to sort of work out, all right, well, if I can get to here, then I need this amount of time to get to there, and I need that amount of time to get to the finish. And every day you have to sort of work that out and then use Google Maps. And then we basically freestyle it in terms of just, oh yeah, that spot looks all right, or that spot looks all right. And a lot of the time it's not, but a lot of the time it works. And then on a mountain stage or whatever, you pick the story of the day. So you pick the big mountain where the attacks or the action's going to happen. rather than say going to the finish where it just looks like another finish line picture. So that's the most stressful part of the job, hands down, is planning the routes every day. That's what I do. And navigating around, because even when you turn up to a roadblock and you've got a sticker that lets you through on the road, French gendarmes love to say no. Like, they love it. It's just fermé, and then that's it. Like, you just can't get on. And it's like, but no, we have accreditation, we're allowed on, and they don't care.
Actually, I read that in one of your Instagram captions today, that the Swiss gendarmes are much better than
they're
the French.
great. Yeah, Switzerland's mint. Yeah, like we went on the Tour de France. We went to Switzerland for one day, and it was, it's the French's race. It's the French race, and we went into another country, and they were so much better and so much more welcoming, and so Tour de France in Switzerland, way better.
Love it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I just looked at my favourite shots that I picked out. Do you have a favourite shot from your career?
I probably, like, it doesn't even have bikes in it. I took a picture of the Arc de Triomphe last year on the Champs-Élysées stage as the French, I don't know what they're called, but the French Air Force, every year they fly over the Arc de Triomphe and down the Champs-Élysées as the riders come up. And in 2019, I messed up the shot and totally missed it. I knew it was happening, but I was in the wrong place, and I got a terrible picture of it. I was really angry. And this year, they're meant to come on the first lap, but because they're French, they were late. So they came on the third lap, and I was in the wrong spot again, but I was at like a 45-degree angle to the arc. And again, because they're French, they weren't flying in the middle of the arc. So it actually all fell into place. And I've got this picture of basically the jets flying across the arc with the French flag smoke in the background, and it's perfectly in line with the corner of the arc.
Right.
And because I missed it in 2019.
We'll chuck it up on the screen as well.
Yeah, because I missed it in 2019, and because I was stressing about missing it again, to like nail that, it doesn't even have bikes in it, but if you know about the Tour de France, if you've watched that final stage, which so many people have, you know what it is. And yeah, it was very satisfying. I mean, there's heaps, but that to me like stands out.
That's the peak.
Yeah, for a really weird reason, to be honest. Like, I should probably pick a cycling picture, but I just love it.
It counts.
Yeah.
We won't keep you too much longer, but a couple reflection questions we'd like to ask everyone on the show. You're a few years into a career. Is there anything you might change along the way?
I'd love some more clients.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm definitely still building like who I work for, who I work with. There's a lot more stuff going on this year, which is really promising, and stuff starting to fall into place. But it's really hard specifically in cycling, because if you're not there, no one cares. Like you asked before about portfolio and stuff. To be perfectly honest, I hit up every single person before I went over in 2019 to ask to work for them. And you send them what you've got. And unless they know the riders, unless it's pictures from the previous season and it's all quantifiable for them, they won't even look at you.
Right.
So what I've been doing, especially last year, like, is building a base of work that I can then market to people and show to people to sort of say, yeah, well, look, I mean, this is what I do. This is what I do at these races that your team is at, or your products are at, or your publication wants coverage from, and sell that on. So I don't necessarily know if I'd want to do anything different, but I want to keep pushing what I've been doing. But yeah, I mean, take the shot that nobody else has ever got.
Yeah.
That's always what you want to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the way it's going now and with the way it's progressing. And it's just going to take time.
Final question. Something we ask everyone here. 15-year-old Zac, he's sitting right in front of you. What advice are you giving him?
I suppose do exactly what you've been doing.
Yeah.
Maybe lay off the cycling chat in class and stuff, because it made you a bit of a target. But it's funny. I reflect a lot, honestly, because like my whole life I've wanted to do what I'm doing, and it sounds really corny, but it has been what I've always wanted to do. Like when I was a kid, I always wanted to go to these races, and so to work on them and actually be there and be involved, it's like everything that I wanted when I was then and when I was that kid and like dreaming about it, I now get to go and do. So yeah, I don't know if necessarily I'd say anything, try and sort of change anything that I've done, because whatever it is I've done, whoever I've met and whichever sort of way I've managed to fall into it, it's worked, or it's working. So it's surreal.
Before I let you go, where can we find you and what can we look forward to this year?
Yeah, Instagram, I'm just ZW Photography, nice and basic.
Yeah.
Same on Facebook, but Instagram's sort of where I do most. I'm flying to Europe on Wednesday.
Right.
So, yeah, not long now. And I'm starting with Strade Bianche, which is like a race in Tuscany on the white roads. So really, really horrible place to start. So that's always one of the best races of the year. But I mean, yeah, I'm doing all the road season again, and then hopefully maybe some of the cyclocross season as well later in the year. But that's still a bit up in the air.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just more pictures of men and women in Lycra.
Of course. Love it.
Yeah.
That does it for How Did I Get Here Today. You can find us student_edge on Instagram, Student Edge, just one word, on TikTok. Search us up, Student Edge, or How Did I Get Here on YouTube, and head to studentedge.org for all our articles, podcasts, deals, competitions, career tips, education advice, and much, much more. Zac, thank you so much for joining me today.
Man, you're a smooth plugger. Thank you very much.